Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged. That's my guy.
Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. I am Steven, as you know. I'm a solo host today, here to break down the Rashawn Slater extension. Very excited that this deal got done today. Saves me from watching, backup UFL tackles tomorrow at practice. And just, I think, we kind of highlighted this previously, allows the Chargers to kind of settle into a groove with their offensive line. They've had some time to kind of sort through the Zion Bradley Bozeman thing. So hopefully, this week, next week, the starting five can just kind of, be established and the Chargers can run with it. Obviously, there's been some kind of rumblings about Andre James, Jamari Sawyer, maybe potentially working in there. But I think I still believe the main five is going to be the main five, and they just feel better about their backups at this point in time. Apologies for the poor setup. As you guys know, I am on vacation. I will be at training camp practice tomorrow. So doing this from the Airbnb that we have down here in Newport Beach, but excited to be here nonetheless. As always, make sure and check out our friends over at PrizePicks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. Obviously, they are full steam ahead with baseball season. We're still a few months away from officially having football games to be able to use PrizePicks for. But baseball is just heating up. So make sure to step up to the plate with PrizePicks and add your favorite baseball players to your lineup today. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, make your call with more or less and play for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Again, that is 2,000 times your cash today. Best way to do this is download the app, whatever app store you use. Search up PrizePicks there. Go and use the code GUILTY to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that is code GUILTY to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's dive into this. I'm going to make the presentation bigger for you guys so you can kind of see everything, up close and personal. In terms of our audio audience, I'm obviously going to, explain everything as we go. Okay, so a lot of these contract details coming from Adam Schefter, Mike Florio, others. Ian Rappaport has had some details as well, but the most important things here on the screen are that this is a 4-year, $114 million contract extension for Rashawn Slater, third highest total value ever. Tristan Wirfs got $140 million total. Andrew Thomas got $117 million total. Those were across 5-year contracts. So if you want to kind of be technical here, it is the highest value of a 4-year contract for any offensive lineman in NFL history. $92 million guaranteed for Rashawn Slater. Again, most ever for any offensive lineman. I shared some contract negotiation details in the Discord. I'm not going to get into it here. But if you're not in the Discord, it's there for you to go check out. The average per year is $28.5 million per year. Again, highest in NFL history. And according to Mike Florio, he has a $29 million signing bonus, which combined with the salary, everything like that, makes it the highest cash flow for any offensive lineman in NFL history in the first year. And again, will also be the largest cash flow in the years 2 and 3 of any NFL offensive lineman ever, again, according to Mike Florio. So the Chargers are paying a lot of cash to get this contract done. I think that's part of the reason why, obviously, the contract took so long to iron out. There's been some other contracts, like the Zach Tom thing, and just overall offensive lineman contracts that have come out since then that have kind of upped the cash flow number for Rashawn Slater. But again, a very, very hefty contract extension for Rashawn. This contract will run through the 2029 season. So the Chargers obviously are investing a lot of cash, a lot of years into Rashawn. And I think, frankly, you guys listening know how I feel about him, the player. I believe that he's been the best performing Charger on the team over the last 3 years since he's really kind of ascended into the league. I believe he is, right there neck and neck with Tristan Wirfs as, the second or third best offensive tackle in the league. I still kind of hold Trent Williams in that regard just because of his longevity and the way that he's changed the position. But I think you could really make an argument based off the last couple of seasons that Tristan and Rashawn have got it kind of elevated past that point, and maybe they're in the same tier. Um, I think just the way that Rashawn handled this whole contract negotiation deserves praise because, he was doing things that were not necessarily normal in this day and age. He showed up to mini camp and the first few days of training camp and participated in those practices when a lot of players, most players in these positions have decided to hold in, or in, some cases like Terry McLaurin and Trey Hendrickson have decided to hold out completely. So Rashawn shows up, practices without the contract done. I think shows a lot of his character. I think it shows how much he is committed to this particular regime and to this specific team. And, I think obviously the Chargers are rewarding him in kind. And again, a lot of cash for Rashawn Slater's deal going forward. In terms of the long-term cap impact, we'll go over some of this now. Again, a lot of this is from Mike Florio and Daniel Popper in his estimations. But Mike Florio was really the main one to kind of break the whole contract details here. So his new cap hit in 2025 is $14.8 million, again, estimated according to Daniel Popper. He's generally been very, spot on with those kind of things. Shout out Pop. The fifth-year option, which he was going to play on previously, was $19.04 million, 19 if you want to call it even. So the Chargers are essentially saving around $5 million, or less here of cap space for 2025. We'll get into that later. In 2026, the cap hit for Mr. Rashawn Slater is $23.8 million, and then 31.8 in 2027. 29.09 in 2028, and then 33.55 million in 2029. Based on how the Chargers have kind of structured other contracts and how front loaded the cash is, I would expect 2029 to have as low guarantees as the Chargers could have done in this particular contract. Again, a lot of guaranteed money up front. 92 out of the 114 is guaranteed. But I think you'll see the bulk of that come from this current season, with the signing bonus, and then the next 3 seasons. So Rashawn's essentially on a 5-year contract. But in 2029, I would expect them to be able to potentially, have some wiggle room there. I would expect Rashawn to continue to age well. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Prior cap space for 2026 before today was $107 million. That new number for 2026 is $83.5 million. So the Chargers still in good shape in 2026. For 2025, they obviously have a good amount of cap space already. The Mike Williams contract, retiring as well. We'll see what happens. So the Chargers and that 83.5 million number are obviously going to change a lot. They're currently around 30, or excuse me, they're around $31 million in cap space right now. They could obviously make a move or two. They could trade for somebody. Financially, they have the wiggle room. But if you look at their free agent list in 2026 and also who's in 2027, this is a lot of their key core players here, and we'll see about some of them. But in 2026, they have Khalil Mack, Alohi Gilman, Tier Tart, Tyler Conklin, who are all free agents after this upcoming season, essentially. We'll see about Tart, we'll see about Conklin. Those are kind of more on the fence, but Alohi Gilman is one of their most important players on defense. He allowed him and obviously Elijah Molden allowed Derwin to be Derwin and be the flexible chess piece that he is. So there's some important pieces, but then 2027 hits and you have Derwin, Deion Henley, Tuli Tuipulotu, and Mekhi Becton, and Will Dissly, who are all free agents at that time. We'll see about Dissly. He's obviously, on his third contract. He's probably closer to retirement. But if Mekhi Becton hits, and if Deion and Tuli take the leaps that we are thinking they can, those are all significant contracts that the Chargers are probably looking towards. Mekhi being on his, fourth team or fourth contract, essentially, that you might be able to get him, on a relatively low deal. But that's going to be an expensive contract. And so the numbers for 2026 and 2027 for the Chargers. Like I've heard a lot of people say, like, oh, they have a ton of cap space. Maybe we don't really know that. The way that they have set up their contracts and the way that they have drafted means that there's a lot of key pieces here over the next couple of off seasons that could be due new contracts. And obviously potential retirements. Maybe they overplay their values, etc. We'll see here. But if you're just talking about the core 10 players of the Chargers, a lot of them are on this list that are due new contract extensions. And then obviously, Justin Herbert here is going to be due a new contract pretty soon. It's a lot sooner than you guys might realize. With his deal not necessarily looming anytime soon. They obviously have him under contract through 2029. But with the way that the quarterback position has been kind of, escalating here, Justin Herbert's average annual uh, contract places him, pretty, a lot lower on the list than when he signed that contract. I mean, Jared Goff just signed for $53 million. Brock Purdy just signed for 53. So, he could be due a new contract in the next couple of off seasons as well. So a lot can and will change for the Chargers cap sheet. I would not really focus too much on that 83.5 million because they have a lot of players they got to take care of. There's going to be rollover cap from this offseason. The cap will continue to increase. But right now it is 83.5. So just something to keep in mind there. In terms of the roster impact, I just want to take a second and remember how far the Chargers have come from an offensive tackle perspective. Where when Tyler and I and Alex and Jason started covering this team on this podcast, we were doing the whole Trent Scott, Sam Tevy, Michael Schofield, Storm Norton, obviously Brian Bulaga, the ghost of Bulaga. Like the offensive tackle position for the Chargers is in such great shape through 2028 with Slater and Joe Alt that it's hard not to reminisce of like how bad it was. They were okay in like the Russell Okung, Joe Barksdale days. It was fine. Okung was still a pretty good player. But once Okung started dealing with his blood clot and then the Balaga contract just went up in smoke, it was tough, man. It was tough to watch on a weekly basis. And now with these two guys who really could be the best offensive tackle duo very soon, if not this year, maybe in the year after that. So just a great thing to point out. The Joe Alt conversation here is obviously very early. He just finished his rookie season. But the way the offensive tackle position is headed and the way that his career is headed, I think you're likely looking at his future contract being above $35 million per year. There's a lot of guys who could push that number both on the left tackle and right tackle market perspective. And I think that's going to be kind of where we're heading. And obviously, like Lane Johnson is a part of this, but after the 2027 season, you have Trent Williams, Laremy Tunsil, Charles Cross, Brian O'Neill, Paris Johnson, and Darnell Wright. We'll see about that. But those are a lot of like high quality, pieces or potentially high quality pieces in Paris Johnson and Darnell Wright. So those guys are all due contracts sooner rather than later. I mean, the Commanders are going to want to extend Tunsil's deal. We'll see about Cross and Johnson and Wright, but Brian O'Neill has been kind of that next tier of guy behind Panay and Lane Johnson. You obviously have Trent Williams, who could potentially retire, but doesn't really look like he's slowing down. And there are some other ones here, but I think this number is going to continue to climb. And that's going to put, Joe Alt after the 2027 season at a very, very high number. And I think the Chargers obviously are going to be doing that because they're not going to, again, do the same kind of song and dance, I think, after having, Slater and Alt. Like they're going to want to keep Alt, and then who knows how long Slater's going to play, etc. So Joe Alt is obviously going to be a long-term piece here. How high does that number get is going to be very interesting to see because, again, a lot of key pieces, key names heading towards free agency, very soon. From a draft perspective, we have not really seen the Chargers invest a ton into the interior offensive line. And I understand why. Like you have Zion, Jamari, you bring in Bradley Bozeman, you sign Mekhi Becton, you try the whole Trey Pipkins thing. So you're trying to piece things together from a veteran standpoint. But they're going to have to start preparing for Slater, Alt, and Becton, if Becton hits, to be very expensive. So, what does that look like for you from a long term standpoint? You could potentially still work out. Like, I don't love the way training camp has started for Zion Johnson, but if he merits an extension, that's relatively expensive, you can afford to have, that contract and everything else because Joe Alt is still on a rookie contract. But you really got to see them invest, I think, long term draft capital into the left guard and center positions, preparing for the expensive nature of the tackle duo plus Makai Becton. So we're jumping the gun with the Joe Alt conversation, but we're going to get to a point pretty soon here where the Chargers are going to have the most expensive tackle duo in the league. Again, deservingly so, but because of that, I think the Chargers would be very wise to invest a pretty early pick into an interior player next year, and then the year after that as well. And if you're going to continue to be a tip of the spear team, offensive line team, we got to see that translate into draft picks. So again, jumping the gun here, but just something to keep in mind going forward. Okay, so that is about everything that I have regarding Rashawn Slater's contract. Again, I think this is a player who has handled himself more than well enough to merit this kind of contract. The play itself, we didn't talk a ton about his numbers and things like that. We've talked about it. But this is a player who I think is going to be threatening for an all pro nomination every year. And so this is the contract you pay those guys. I'm obviously very excited. I have Slater's jersey hanging up behind me at the studio at home every single day. Again, very excited, very deserving. And that's going to be it for me today. Like I mentioned, I'll be at training camp tomorrow. Obviously, if you guys are around, definitely say hello. And I'll have a video recapping practice shortly after. I have to drive from Newport to El Segundo and back, I should say. So I'll be probably uploading a video around like 3, 4. So yeah, look forward to it. All right, guys, that's gonna do it. We'll see you tomorrow.